Representative Newberry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There's been a lot of talk about, and we heard it tonight from Chairman Craven and others, that this is supposed to be the intent, the purpose is to be a strict codification of Roe v. Wade. In fact, Chairman Craven said after the committee vote that this was an insurance policy in case Roe v. Wade was ruled unconstitutional. Now, we've heard a lot of debate about whether or not some of these amendments and some of the language really is a strict codification of Roe v. Wade, and I'm sure after what I'm about to offer, we'll hear more of that. I don't happen to believe it's a strict codification of Roe v. Wade, but that's not the purpose of the amendment I'm about to offer. I don't understand, well, I do politically, but legally I don't understand why we're doing this tonight. Roe v. Wade is the law of the land. In my personal opinion, if it were going to be overturned by the U.S. Supreme Court, it would have been overturned in Planned Parenthood versus Casey in 1992. Something that I will discuss in terms of another amendment I have after this. But the bottom line is, if it ever is overturned by the U.S. Supreme Court, we're going to have a lot of lead time. So I have an amendment that I'd like to offer now, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to move Amendment LC 000-518/15.
Representative Newberry moves amendment LC 000-518/15. That is seconded by Representative Roberts, Representative Nadone, Whip Chippendale, Representative Price, Representative Quattrochi, Representative Place, Lita Filippi, Representative McLaughlin, Chairman Corvese, Representative Ucci, Representative Ella Wilkinson, Representative O'Brien. Proceed, Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Very briefly, all this amendment does is change the effective date of the act. Most of the legislation we pass becomes effective upon passage, but from time to time we have put effective dates on acts that put them out for a certain amount of time or what have you. All this does is make this act effective upon the U.S. Supreme Court overturning Roe versus Wade. And if that's all we're doing, there shouldn't be any reason to object to this. So I urge you all to support the amendment.
Representative Blazewski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members of the House. I rise in opposition to this amendment. This is what they call a trigger law, and many other states throughout the United States have used similar trigger laws, but in the exact opposite situation. What they're doing is they're passing blatantly unconstitutional laws, putting them on their books, and allowing them to stay on their books because they have a trigger in them. So they don't have to go to court, they don't have to fight it now, they can wait until Roe v. Wade goes down, and then they're right on the books and they can start enforcing them right away. That's what the trigger laws are. It makes no sense at all to put a trigger law in to conform our laws to current law. That makes absolutely no sense. So I urge defeat of this amendment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Lita Filippi.
Thank you. And the point is that many feel that this bill we're passing doesn't conform with current law. And if the bill we're passing does conform with current law, it should make no difference whether we put a trigger on it or not. But I guess people would argue against this amendment because you know it doesn't conform with the current law. There's no change if we pass this amendment or not. Under your position, our position is this bill does not conform with current law, and so it should be put out to a later date. Thank you very much.
Chairman Corvese.
I'm going to watch what I say on this one. This actually has the potential for getting me thrown out of the room. Wasn't that funny, Rebecca? Let me just say that I'm very pleased that Representative Newberry put this bill in, if for nothing else, to give me the opportunity to stand up and talk about this. Because I couldn't find a way to squeeze this into the speech I've got prepared later. So thank you, Leader, if for nothing else. The whole reason why we're here, allegedly, if you listen to everybody, if you listen to the pronouncements of the left, if you listen to the pronouncement of those individuals who feel that the Supreme Court may someday be comprised of 9 conservative judges who are going to overturn Roe versus Wade. Let me just tell each and every one of you, if you never remember me again, and that's okay, I understand that. If you never remember anything I ever say to you during your legislative lives, remember this. There is no way politically, governmentally, that 9 conservative judges, even if we get 9 conservative Supreme Court justices, they will never overturn Roe versus Wade. As much as I personally would like to see it, that will never happen. Now, will there be reasonable, humane, common sense restrictions hopefully placed on them? No second or third trimester abortions. If you want to make the decision within the first trimester, with the exception of the health and welfare of the mother under certain circumstances, of course. But Roe versus Wade will never be overturned. So the specter of Roe versus Wade being overturned is just that. It's amorphous. It's a cloud. It doesn't exist. It's just propaganda and pablum that's been fed by one side to the media who accepts it because they hate this president. And that's fine. But this is propaganda and pablum that's being fed by one side to achieve their agenda. Because you'll never, ever see Roe versus Wade ever turned over in this country. You may see reasonable limitations, if there is such a thing within the legal community, reasonable limitations. Common sense, I don't know if common sense and legal restrictions, I don't know if they're mutually exclusive. But you'll never see Roe versus Wade. That's just propaganda. That's pablum to further an agenda. That's all it is. So, if anything makes a legitimate point, if anything is pertinent tonight, although I have to say, I like to think the last 2 amendments were pretty pertinent, especially mine. I would have to say that this is certainly gets to the heart of the matter. You're worried about Roe versus Wade being overturned? You can still have your cake and eat it too. Vote for the amendment.
Representative McCannon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in opposition to the amendment. I look at my good friend and mentor, Doc Corvese, and I say, for you, Doc, you and I agree. I don't think Roe v. Wade will ever be overturned. I, secondly, would add that I don't think that the Supreme Court will ever give up the power to decide issues of privacy. That's their function. They help balance individuals versus government interference. That's what's going on here. But I come to a different conclusion. Because the Supreme Court did speak over 40 years ago, we are stuck. We can't have a civilized conversation on the issue no matter how you feel about it. And we're stuck, basically, one side kind of not respecting the U.S. Supreme Court. So I'm going to focus on that word for a second, respect. We have to respect women. We have to respect truth. We have to respect science, and we have to respect the U.S. Supreme Court. The U.S. Supreme Court has said this right is granted. It's implied under the 14th Amendment. It's been done, and now it is time for us to take our unconstitutional laws off the books. I think it's that simple.
Representative McLaughlin.
Mr. Speaker and members of the House, I would ask you to support this amendment. I know you're not gonna. I know that this amendment's gonna fail, all right? But a day after Lent, here we are. Thou shalt not kill. You know what this represents? This represents the biggest sham going. And if you vote on the codification of Roe versus Wade today, I'll tell you what, it's a sham brought about by our governor and higher powers, okay? We're amongst, 7 states Last year, there were 2,000 abortions performed right here in the state of Rhode Island. You probably drove right by them. Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry, guys. 2,000 abortions, so the killing field continues. So I know how this is going to wind up. It's a sham, and it's a disgrace to human life. Thank you.
Whip Chippendale.
Thank you, Speaker. I recall 2 years ago after we started the General Assembly of 2017 and 2018, it was obviously on the heels of the election of this extremely unpopular president. There was an onslaught of individuals who came into this room, and those who were here at that time certainly remember it, who were imploring us to take some action on some issues, and this was certainly one of them. The Affordable Health Care Act was another one. And they were imploring us to do so because there was a concern that this president, in his madness, would be able to, I guess, wave a magic wand and make these laws just disappear. It was very clear in 2017 that that irrational reaction to an unfavorable election outcome was based on nothing but hatred of an individual and irrational fears. We are talking about an extremely simple amendment. I can't recall, I have a crappy memory, but I can't recall an amendment that was this simple in any of our debates. And this gets to the very heart of the matter, doesn't it? And that's why it's so hard. It gets at the heart of the matter, because the heart of the matter is this. We're afraid a madman in Washington is going to take away what we perceive as rights. We shouldn't be legislating based on irrational fears. If this person does this, and if they get a Supreme Court comprised of these people, and if they decide to overturn, and if we don't legislate on series of ifs, folks, that's irresponsible, which we're not. We have been told for 2 years, we're in our third, that we have to protect Roe versus Wade because a madman in Washington is going to overturn it. This amendment is precisely what has been lobbied for. Precisely. If the madman gets his way, bam! Newberry's amendment kicks in, and the protections are still afforded. We can again go through mental acrobatics and come up with what-if scenarios and all sorts of just esoteric arguments on what may or may not happen, but that's not going to change the matter. This has been presented since day one as a protection to codify Roe. In the event the madman blows it up. Upon explosion, boom, kicks in. No one misses a beat. No one. So if we're being intellectually honest with each other and with the public, we must accept this amendment. It's imperative. Otherwise, we are betraying our own words as a body. We are admitting that we were lying. Because this does specifically and exactly and succinctly what has been argued for the past 2 years. Not just in Rhode Island, but nationwide. Let's not be hypocrites. Let's not demonstrate that we're liars. Let's not be liars. Let's not be disingenuous. This achieves the goal. simply. Thank you.
Representative McEntee.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in opposition to this amendment. I've listened to all of the arguments. Why must we wait? Why do we women have to continue to wait? If there is any chance that our rights are going to be overturned, the rights that we have had for 46 years, we're doing nothing but protecting the women of Rhode Island who are anxious. We are worried about losing our right to choose. If you are comfortable with this bill in its current form, but not until the United States Supreme Court overturns Roe v. Wade, then be comfortable with it now and give the women of Rhode Island and the 71% of the people of Rhode Island who are in favor of this, give them what they're asking for. Give it to them now. It's not going to change. Tomorrow is going to be the same day we have today, only we women in Rhode Island will feel our rights have been preserved in case the United States Supreme Court overturns Roe v. Wade. So please vote against this amendment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Agello.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members of the House, for some of you who are a little newer in the House than I am, this is not in reaction to the current president. In 1993, Chair Anastasia Williams, Chairman Robert Jackard, Deputy Speaker Charlene Lima, and I were fresh person legislators. And Speaker pro tempore Brian Kennedy was in his third term. All four of us voted for a bill to codify Roe v. Wade. That bill passed the House and only to stall in the Senate. In 1993, Bill Clinton, an avowedly pro-choice president, was in office. And we did that then. We have women in Rhode Island, women in this chamber, have been working on this issue all of that time. That's 26 years and counting.
Representative Vella Wilkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise in support of this amendment. The Center for Reproductive Rights asked the question, what if Roe fell? And what's been happening in the National Conference of State Legislatures is they have been tracking the trigger bill, state trigger bill with regards to abortions. And in the trigger bill, it said that states will ban abortions the moment that Roe is overturned, not the opposite. And those states include Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, North and South Dakota, and Kentucky, Ohio, South Carolina, and Tennessee currently have trigger bills that are in the pipeline. So, ladies and gentlemen, this, in my estimation, is not a trigger bill that is going to prevent abortion, as in the other states who have already passed this type of a bill that says that abortion is going to be illegal once Roe is overturned. What this is saying is that we have the federal law in place now, and if the protections under the federal law are eliminated, Rhode Island will have a way to protect the reproductive rights of their women. Thank you.
Representative Knight.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in opposition. You know, I hate to pull out the lawyer card every time, but this is something for any one of you who are seriously considering this to think about. The United States Supreme Court does not always speak with clarity when they do something. I'll give you as an example Bush v. Gore, right? Bush v. Gore, the one that decided the Florida election in 2000. It's on the books. But it says in the decision, this has no precedential value. So does it exist legally? Has it been overturned? I don't know, right? Sometimes, especially on tough subjects, they punt in ways that we cannot tell. And what you learn first day in law school is that the whole point of the law is to provide stability and predictability so we can order our affairs in society. With this bill, we are taking our affairs into our own hands, not relying on the federal government, not relying on 9 people who we've never met and, are unelected and all that good stuff, and not relying on them to speak as clearly as we need them to speak. So don't be sucked into the idea that someone's going to flip a switch and all of a sudden Roe is overturned. The legalities are more complicated than that. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
There are no other lights. Clerk, unlock the machine. All in favor of the amendment, please vote green. Those opposed, red. Clerk, lock the machine. 28 in favor, 42 opposed. The amendment fails.